what an intro. I love that. That's our new intro. We just are rejuvenating our podcast after a 6-month hiatus. With me today is Genevieve Collins, one of my favorite guests, who's been with us twice before. She is the Texas Director for Americans for Prosperity. Genevieve, how are you today?
I am well. Happy Valentine's Day. How are
Same to
you?
you. Same to you. I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. I'm healthy, and so is my wife. So that's good. That's all we ask
That's
for.
as much as you can ask for.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Listen, we're here today to talk about AFP Texas's goals for the Texas legislative session. Of course, the legislature's fully in session now. The governor has given his State of the State address. We have a big agenda for this session of the legislature, as always. Things are very busy in Texas. Things are changing very rapidly in our state, mostly for the better, I think. And so before we get going into the Q&A to talk about your priorities for the session, why don't you just take a couple of minutes, remind our audience about AFP Texas and what you guys do, your role in all of this.
Sure. Well, Americans for Prosperity is what I call the taxpayer champion. So we are the largest nonpartisan policy and grassroots organization in the country. I happen to run the state of Texas chapter, and really our lane in the political, grassroots, and policy ecosystem is that we are the taxpayer champion. We don't work on social issues, but we work on all the issues that your tax dollars are affected. So that's education, healthcare, immigration, energy, housing, and obviously taxes. So no small agenda here, but really we want to make sure that as a grassroots organization, we connect people with policy and help uplift their voices so that at scale, whether it's in Austin or in Washington, D.C., people have a voice to their legislators, and their legislators hear authentically what's going on, not just in their communities, but across the state, and what solutions can really come to bear from a policy perspective and help make this state great.
Well, it is a great state, and you guys certainly help. I'm blessed to have lived in Texas all my life. Have you been in Texas your whole life?
I have. I did a short stint away, but not that far. I went to the University of Tennessee for 4 years.
Oh.
So I like to say I went to the real UT. As anyone of your audience may know, Tennessee. Without Tennessee, we wouldn't have Texas.
That's
so
exactly
I'm
right.
a lady Vol through and through. But otherwise, I'm a 7th generation Texan. I bleed Texas. Someone asked me, it goes, "Where's your lineage from?" I said, "Texas." And they go, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, we've been here for 7 generations. We were here since 1846. We don't really care what happened beforehand. We found paradise and never left."
Exactly. My family background's very similar to that. So, Texas is always my first priority after my family and God.
Yes.
So let's talk about your priorities. This is an energy related podcast, but I'm not going to make you talk about that first. I want to talk about first your focus on school choice and, education savings accounts. There's already legislation being pushed through the legislature now on both topics. And I know that AFP Texas is very interested in that.
Yes. So before I launch into school choice, let me just set the table for a moment. Texas, and specifically the Texas legislature, is really at the precipice of having what I believe is really transformational and generational policy opportunity during this next 5 months. And what does that look like? It looks like more freedom, more opportunity, and more prosperity for all Texans. And when we think about education freedom, we think about that in terms of school choice. And really what education freedom means, it means that every child has a gift. Every child should be able to go to the school that best serves their needs, and that parents should have the freedom to choose the best school for their child, not just send their child to the school that they're zoned to. And so here in Texas, this has been a, I don't know, 40-year battle to try to get school choice to happen. And it's really, there's this false narrative, David, around school choice that it's just this public schools versus private schools. And that's a false narrative and a false
Yeah.
choice. Because when we're only framing student outcomes and student education around the building that the child is in versus equipping the child to have great student outcomes regardless of what building they're in, we're creating this false dichotomy. And so what we're trying to do is say, Texas is going to pass the largest school choice bill in the history of the country. We're going to put $1 billion from our surplus budget. Now, for your non-Texas folks, Texas has a unique position because for the last 2 cycles, we've had huge surpluses. Huge surpluses, mostly thanks to the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
This year, we've had $24 billion surplus on top of our general revenue. So our state is rolling. And we want to make sure that we siphon off some of that money for property tax reform, but also for school choice so that every child can get a great education. So we're going to put $1 billion of that surplus into a school choice program called an education savings account. Think of it as like a 401k for your child. You're investing in their future. You're able to choose and direct where those dollars go for your child's education, and specifically what school you want to send your child to, or what kind of tutoring you need to support your child, what kind of educational expenses do you need to help your child continue to succeed. That's where we're going to use education savings accounts as an investment in the future. And I think that for the first time ever, we're going to pass school choice in the state of Texas because we have the votes in both the House and Senate chambers for the first time ever.
Thank goodness. I mean, the House has been such a challenge in recent sessions.
It certainly has. But that's what AFP that we were focused on last year. Since it was a non-electoral year, we wanted to see who can we identify to be better policy champions, not just for school choice, but for freedom, opportunity, prosperity at large on taxpayer issues. And let's go get those people elected. There are some people that just may need to go. And so we helped them find an exit and brought in some new fresh blood into the Texas House.
And go seek other opportunities, right?
Yes, we wanted them to find new opportunities, and they
Exactly.
have.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, and forgive my ignorance. I haven't studied the school choice bill. I just know it's a high priority. Is the rainy day fund, which of course is basically funded by the tax on natural gas, is that going to play any role in the ongoing funding of the school choice initiative?
It will not, actually.
Okay.
And due to our large surplus, we're going to continue to allocate dollars. I think we're going to hit the ceiling of our rainy day fund, which means
Right.
we'll have to constitutionally change the ceiling of our rainy day fund because we'll be close to $30 billion in our just rainy day fund. And that's excluding, the rest of the surplus that we have as a state. And so, but the school choice will not be funded or will not touch any part of the rainy day fund.
So for people who don't know, Texas has far and away the most well-funded rainy day fund of any state in the country, and was a really pioneer in that area early in the 1980s. I think it was the 81 legislature that initially authorized the creation of the rainy day fund, and it's funded with the severance tax on natural gas. And it's just one of the, it's just one of so many things that makes our state really unique, our state government uniquely stable and able to keep funding all these priorities for our people here in Texas. And it's really a blessing. Another thing I want to touch on that I think is so important, really interrelates with the education system, in my view, is border security. Because, our public schools have been so overwhelmed with this enormous influx of children from all over the world in recent years. Yeah. And I think getting our hands around border security is so important. The Trump administration is doing so much, but I just wonder what, in AFP's view, the state ought to be doing in this session to help enhance those efforts down there.
Well, it's wonderful, David, that we have an administration that actually believes in securing our border.
Yeah.
Um, you know, everyone knows that Texas took the brunt of the last 4 years of an insecure and unstable border, followed by an unstable administration on their policy on border security. And so, because this administration is so hyper focused on closing the border and making that a real priority for all Americans, it's taking some of the relief off of Texas taxpayers. So
Yeah.
Texas taxpayers over the last 2 years, or maybe even over the last 4, have sent $11 billion of our taxpayer money to work to secure our border. So you guys might have seen Governor Abbott. He was in DC last week and again yesterday. Senator John Cornyn and Governor Abbott are working on a bill that would reimburse Texans back for us having to pay for our own border security. So we really like that idea, bringing fiscal responsibility, but as also saying like, hey, we have results and we did the hard work as Texas taxpayers. Just because the federal government decided to absolve themselves of their primary duty to keep citizens safe doesn't mean you're off the hook for paying for border security. So we'd like to see that money come back to Texas taxpayers. In addition, though, on a practical perspective, at AFP, we believe that whether it's at the federal level or at the state level, seeing more Border Patrol agents, seeing more judges, having more ICE agents, having more technology, and actually building physical barriers, whether that's a wall or other structures in areas that will push people towards a port of entry versus this porous people pouring in through all across the border. We want to push people towards ports of entry so they can actually be identified, and physical structures matter. It helps deter this porousness into our border, but it also helps Border Patrol get more time to identify and detain these people. So those are the practical solutions that we want. We are also in favor of, making sure that people that come here and get visas are able to work and contribute.
Right.
We need workers. We're not anti-immigrants, anti-migrants at all, but we want to see people come here legally and be counted so then they can contribute meaningfully to our workforce. And so those are kind of the practical things that we're working on both at the state and the federal level.
So we have a comment from a fellow who I know, Christopher Messina. He goes by Messy Times, which is the name of his own podcast. It says, thank heavens we have adults in charge once again, keeping the border secure. It's not rocket science. It just requires good leadership. Well done. And I thank you, Christopher. I think that's right on, obviously.
Yeah, well, and being married to a rocket scientist, I can tell you this is not rocket science. My husband worked at NASA for 6 years and helped build the Artemis rocket. And he's like, what is going on with this administration? This is not challenging. The previous administration,
yes.
In your phrase. This is just being focused, and they clearly have a lack of it.
Yeah, it's just a matter of will and a matter of want to. And then President Biden, wanted an open border for obvious reasons. He was trying to build a big voting bloc for the Democratic Party's future, and we all know that. And there's no use mincing words about it. I'm not one to pull punches. I
love that about you.
Yeah, well, you either talk about these things bluntly and honestly, or we shouldn't talk about them at all. Let's move on to energy, though. I know you guys have big concerns about the power grid, as we all have had in recent years, and are advocating for some things in this session related to it. First of all, though, I want to get your opinion. Just looking at how the grid's performed here over the past 2 winters and last summer, when I think a lot of people looking at it thought we would have big problems in August last year, and we didn't. And a lot of people thought we were going to have big problems with that big freeze event a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't. It seems, first of all, like the reforms that I know AFP was in favor of in 2021 and 2023 are having their intended effect, aren't they?
They are. There's more that can be done. People, we have 1,300 people moving to Texas every day.
Yeah.
We have an influx of energy users. And so, what has happened in 21 and 23 Texas legislative sessions have created a great foundation for stability. We need to continue to add to that. Texas is only projected to grow more and more and more, and we need more dispatchable, more reliable energy, and we need more transmission. And so we're really looking at those three components.
Yeah.
As we look at the grid, but as we look kind of more long term, how are we thinking about innovation and data centers and energy capacity and load? How are we looking at nuclear energy as a real viable energy operator, if you will, or energy capacity to just continue to add? And also, how do we look at the macro level from an energy perspective of what AI is going to do to transform the state of Texas, but to transform our economy as a country? And what is that load and what's that generation going to do? And so those are kind of the macro things that we're looking at and saying, well, we may not be the energy experts like you, David. We understand that from a macro level, there is a lot that still needs to be done. And like I said, we're in this transformative period now where we can go push to do a lot of these big energy changes, maybe not energy change, but big energy policy to really kind of continue to modernize what's happening in the state.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned transmission. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Go ahead, I'm done.
Well, and transmission you mentioned is really people underestimate how big a problem that is in Texas, not just in Texas, but all over the country. We have a need to build like 200,000 miles of new high capacity transmission, according to the Biden administration. Of course, it'll all change now that we have adults in charge, but the Biden administration itself, admitted we needed 200,000 miles of new transmission over the next decade, which obviously can't happen. And that's all to accommodate all these wind and solar projects out in the hinterlands to bring whatever they manage to generate to the demand centers. I think a lot of that's going to change, but here in Texas, we have several bottlenecks, and ERCOT talks about this a lot, related to moving energy generated in South Texas up into the Dallas area and things like that. And so I just was glad to hear you talk about the need for transmission and to fix that piece of the system, because it's a real looming big time problem for our grid.
It is, and we have to get ahead of it. And I think what's been interesting this cycle more than ever before, I think in the last kind of 2021, 2023, we were very reactive to the winter storm Uri that just kind of took everyone by surprise. It shut our state down. So it was highly reactive. And I think the temperature in the legislature is like, we now have to be proactive. We have to be reactive to some things. And we know that August is going to be, a hot month with a lot of load and a lot of capacity, or not a lot of capacity. But how do we be more proactive to look, what do we need to have by 2030 and 2040? And how do we create that infrastructure now? And that's the message that I think members are really leaning into. And that's certainly AFP's message. It's like, build the infrastructure now that you can keep building on, because we're going to need a lot more transmission. We're going to need a lot more capacity. And if any state should be the leader in this, it should be Texas.
That's exactly right. And of course, in times like these, when we do have a big surplus and the government's well funded, this is really the time to get your arms around these future, these projects that are a vision towards the future and getting things put in place that we can build on. So, now's the time to do it. I'm really glad to see you guys advocating for all that in Austin. Austin needs the help, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we just got to bring you and all your listeners, all your audience, y'all come on down. We will happily bring you around the Capitol and showcase your expertise on how
Well,
Texas can be a leader.
I'm glad you said that because people can do that, right? I mean, tell people how they can engage with you guys and really kind of get involved with the program at AFP.
So the big thing that we do is we bring people to the Capitol all the time. So I've got 14 offices across the state of Texas. We've got local grassroots engagement directors who meet with community members to talk about the issues they care about. But more importantly, just because you care about an issue, we help you get to the point where it's like how you can have a voice and help solve the issue that you care about, whether that's doing in-district office visits with your members or coming to Austin when there's hearings. We can help with you coming to testify and sharing your story and helping inform the dais of legislators on the natural resources panel, for example. We hold legislators accountable when they take bad votes because if you're not doing what's in the best interest of Texas taxpayers, your constituents need to know about it. We don't believe in wasteful, fraudulent overspending. We believe in doing the right thing the first time and being principled about it. So we hold folks accountable. And so you can go to our website, freedomisbigger.com. You can sign petitions about energy policy, healthcare policy, school choice, taxes. You can sign petitions. You can sign up to be one of our volunteers or ambassadors, where we anoint people to be evangelists around the state for making freedom bigger in Texas. There's a lot we need to work on. We're in a great place, but there's a lot that we need to still do. And we need more evangelists to share the message.
Well, one of our evangelists, Tom Mumford, who is a very, very smart guy, and I've known for a while, says Emily and Mary Beth in Pennsylvania are doing remarkable work. You want to be sure you knew that.
They are. And Tom, thank you for that. I will pass that on. They're amazing.
And then Christopher weighs in again. He says, can I assume you at AFP are taking guidance and direction from Sandy Cortez, who I hear knows lots of smart stuff about energy?
We certainly have conversation with her. We talked to Katie Coleman in Texas, and we have a huge energy policy, I don't know what you say, experts, a huge portfolio of experts. I've only had one cup of coffee, so I apologize if I sound like I'm mumbling. But we have a huge group of experts from around the country, and they're housed in DC and help us craft our energy policy. But it's an all hands on deck. This is not just a Texas opportunity.
Right. And I think people need to also understand, of course, that the national AFP is heavily engaged in Congress and with the administration on advocacy for all kinds of issues, including energy, and is a big, robust organization, obviously. One last thing I want to talk to you about that's one of my favorite things on your website is titled the Committee on Stupid Rules. I want you to talk about what you mean when you talk about the Committee on Stupid Rules, because it's something that has been a pet peeve of mine for a long time.
Well, I have to first off say thank you for coming to our round table with Senator Ted Cruz on energy. But we kind of launched this last year, what we call the Committee on Stupid Rules, because I believe that when we talk about regulations and the rulemaking process when it comes to policy, that it's too wonky, and that in reality, there's a lot of barriers that come up for small business owners, sole proprietors, entrepreneurs, that just create more red tape than there needs to be. And instead of talking about regulations, which feels really wonky, let's just talk about sometimes what these things are. Stupid rules, highly duplicative rules, licensing rules, extra fees. There's all sorts of stuff. David, I don't know if you know this, but in Texas, we are the 5th most regulated state in the country. Yeah. So we are behind California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and Texas. Texas has 274,394 state regulations. And that's crazy. If we talk about how much we are this pro-business, pro-innovation, pro-growth state with all of these policies that are about really supporting the taxpayer, But at the other side, flip of the coin, we're the fifth most regulated state. Why is that? We need to actually understand and listen to what are the rules and regulations that are creating barriers for real Texans across the state. And so I just decided, let's call these things what they are, not stupid rules. You know, if you own a food truck, for example, you've got to pay licensing fees and health licensing fees. If you live in Dallas, Texas, and you work in 16 different cities around Dallas, you have to pay that same fee 16 times, multiple times a year. Well, if your food truck business is a sole proprietor, that's like $10,000 to your annual budget, like to your bottom line. Why is that? So we're highlighting a lot of different rules and regulations, and the energy sector knows regulations better than anybody. And the Biden administration put a ton of regulations and really hamstring the energy sector. And so we really want to start to look under the hood and repeal all of the, not all, but a lot of unnecessary regulations so that innovation and growth can happen.
Well, I was wrong. That wasn't my last question. Obviously, you are a tax-focused organization, and I haven't asked you about tax reform. Is there going to be a tax reform bill in Texas this session?
So let me say there's going to be two types of bills. So at the state level, I'm going to say one's at the state, one's at the federal level.
Yeah.
At the state level, we're focused on property tax reform, making sure that part of our surplus budget goes to paying down property taxes. We just can't have people continue to pay out the nose on their property taxes. And how do we look at compressing rates? How do we look at homestead exemptions? And how do we look at appraisal rates and really capping those so that folks aren't just getting 10% increases? Part of that equation of property tax reform also has to look at local government spending, or let me rephrase, local government overspending.
Yeah.
So if the state holds themselves to the standard of population growth plus inflation as the standard for our fiscal responsibility, why aren't our local governments doing the same? Our local governments are way overspending, way overtaxing our citizens, and are causing our taxes to rise at the local level. Even though the state level is trying to raise our taxes, Texans aren't getting relief. So we're going to focus on tackling those two big issues. At the federal level, we're focused on making sure the Trump tax cuts get extended. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 is set to expire at the end of this year. What that means is that the average family in America would experience a minimum of $1,500 more on their annual income taxes next year. In Texas families would experience $2,870,000 per year if those tax cuts don't get extended. And if we talk about the lifetime present value of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it's $25,000 extra dollars. That is a lot of money coming out of 4 years of Biden's inflation, high interest rates, high prices. We can't afford to not extend these tax cuts. And I think what's difficult for folks to realize, especially on the Democrat side, is that this is a tax hike by the end of this year if these tax cuts don't get extended. You know, families in Texas are going to get an extra $2,800 on their IRS bill. We can't afford that after 4 years of Biden. So we really are working hard to support our Ways and Means members and our members in Congress to make sure that they pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extension.
Well, it looks like we had some good movement on that in the House yesterday, right? With every Republican apparently behind this draft piece of legislation, which, you know, is it's really hard for Speaker Johnson to wrangle that caucus, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's going to be a long year for Speaker Johnson, unfortunately. But we support him and appreciate his, gentle warriorness. He's trying to wrangle all these wily kittens. It seems,
it's it's a hard job if you had a 30-seat majority, but when you have a 3-seat majority, it's really tough. It's almost impossible job, and every time somebody says we need a new speaker, I think, well, who wants that job? I mean, my goodness, I wouldn't have it. You couldn't pay me enough money.
No, certainly.
Anyway, well, we are up against time. I thank you so much, Genevieve. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you. I just really respect and admire the work you're doing. I know it's a real sacrifice, and people need to appreciate what you're doing. And I hope you'll be back again
Thank
soon.
you. For you, anytime. Thank you, David. I so appreciate you. And for anyone listening, please go to our website, freedomisbigger.com, sign our petitions. We will send letters to your lawmakers saying you want this change. And so it's just a simple 15-second signing the petition. You can have an automatic action go directly towards your lawmaker and have your voice heard. So I encourage you to do that. And follow us on Twitter at Texas AFP.
And remember, if you don't engage, you can't complain, folks. It's so easy to do, takes almost no time. So get out there and do it. Thank you. Thank everybody for watching and all the comments. I'm sorry I didn't get to everything, but we'll try to do better next time. And we'll see you again soon on the Energy Impacts podcast. Thank you.